Chapter 10. The next morning, Marcel woke with the light. Last night before bed, Papa had told him about the message he needed to bring to the resistance member in the neighbouring town. Still rubbing his eyes, he went into the kitchen. He could smell the bread his mother had baked, a round peasant loaf, and the pain d'épices the soldiers liked so much. He knew it was hard getting supplies to bake anything these days, and the shelves of the bakery were often empty or nearly so. Marcel ate breakfast while she wrapped up the baked goods. She put the loaf in a white cloth and the pain d'épices in a checked cloth. Remember, if they ask, give the soldiers the pain d'épices, she said. Maybe they won't even bother you today. It was a day honouring Saint Francois Xavier. He was born in Navarre, in Spain, but was well known and loved in the entire region. The holiday was wildly celebrated and school would be closed. Everyone would be in church and not focused on Marcel, or where he happened to be going on his bike. "Don't worry," he told his mother. "I'll remember." Both she and his father stepped outside to watch him as he pedalled off down the road. It had rained the night before, and there was still a fine mist hovering over everything as Marcel rode down the cobblestone street, heading out of town. There was a slight nip in the air, too. He wished he'd remembered to wear gloves, but he just pedalled harder, relying on his own body to create warmth and power. That was what the riders in the Tour de France would have done. Every victory they achieved came their own personal sense of determination. Once Marcel had reached the outskirts of town, he turned left, away from the direction of the bridge. This was a different route, not one he usually took. This was the direction his father had outlined in his instructions. The road here was very bumpy. It was also slippery from the rain and from all the wet leaves that were plastered everywhere. As he rounded a curve, the bike went over an especially big bump, and the loaf of bread flew out of the basket, flipped over and landed right smack in the centre of a shallow puddle. Zoot! Marcel jumped off the bike and hurried over to inspect the damage. The muddy water had seeped through the white cloth and into the bread. He peeled the cloth away and blotted the loaf against his pants. Then he remounted and continued on his way. As he rode, he looked down at the contents of his basket. The bread still looked all right, thank goodness. Besides, he had the pain d'épices if he needed something to offer. Soon he found himself on the main road down into town. The central square was filled with people coming from church. Many of them were on bicycles as well. But the square was filled with something else too, something terrifying. Rolling up the main street was an armoured truck. The soldiers driving it were clearly German. What were they doing? Looking for Jews to deport? Marcel wanted to get out of there as quickly as he could, but a French gendarme stationed under the equestrian statue of General Napoleon caught sight of him and gestured for him to come over. Marcel was nervous as he obeyed the gendarme's command. "What do you have there?" the gendarme asked. "Bread, sir." He hoped he didn't sound too scared. "And where are you taking it?" Marcel was silent. He did not want to say where he was going. He might put the resistance member in danger if he did. But before he could answer, another gendarme came and they began arguing. It seemed to be about whose turn it was to do something. The question about where Marcel was apparently forgotten, at least for now. Marcel was just about to ask if he could leave when one of the gendarmes looked into his basket. "Smells good," he commented. "I want a piece." Marcel's mouth went bone dry with terror. The gendarme was pointing at the loaf of bread that contained the note. "No, you idiot. Forget the bread. We can get bread anywhere. Look what else he's got. I can smell it." The second gendarme was opening the checked cloth to reveal the pain d'épices. "Take it," Marcel urged, praying they would forget about the other loaf. "My mother made it and it's really good. Everyone says so. She's known for her pain d'épices. Famous even." He was babbling now. his nervousness causing him to talk. "Merci," said the gendarme as he tucked the bundle under his arm. "Maybe we should take both," he asked his comrade. Marcel went stiff as a plank with panic. These men were cooperating with the Germans. If the gendarme took the loaf, he'd find the note. Then what? His imagination painted horrible pictures. His parents dragged from their home, interrogated, maybe even tortured or killed. Nah, let's leave something for the kid, right? He leaned over to give Marcel a gentle punch on the arm. "Go on home now and say thanks to your famous mum." Dumbly, Marcel nodded as he sped off. The wheels of the bike seemed to be chanting this refrain. Almost caught, almost caught, almost caught. But he didn't get caught, he reminded himself. He was still free, still all right, and the note was still in the loaf of bread. Now it was up to him to deliver it. After he'd been told to go home, Marcel didn't want the gendarmes to see him, still pedalling around, so he rode back the way he'd come in, then circled round the edges of town for almost an hour, trying to find another way to get in. Now he was behind schedule, but there was nothing he could do. Finally, he discovered a small hidden path near a cemetery. The moss-covered headstones dotting the grass looked ancient. Many were crumbling, cracked or tilted. He slowed to read a few of the dates. 1851, 1807, 1899. If he'd had more time, he would have gone in to explore. It was spooky in there and looked interesting, but he didn't dare stop, not now. After following the narrow path into town, he kept riding around until he found the right street. And there, on the corner, was the clock and watch repair shop that his father had described to him. A big pocket clock was painted on the sign out the front, just as he'd said. The shop was closed, but Marcel used a special code: 3 fast knocks, a pause, and 2 slow knocks. His father said this was necessary because the person in the shop did not know him personally. There was a long silence, during which he had to wonder if he was in the right place after all. Then finally someone came to the door and opened it a crack. When the man behind the door saw Marcel standing there, he opened it wider and without a word gestured for Marcel to come inside and to bring his bicycle. The man was tall and slightly stooped, with silver hair and silver-rimmed glasses. Marcel's father had described him perfectly. What he had not mentioned was the man's ankle was heavily bandaged and he was using a cane. Marcel offered the man the remaining loaf of bread. "Bonjour, monsieur," he said, just as his father had instructed. "I have a small gift for you. It's very tasty French bread, and I think you will enjoy it." The man took the bread. He understood the message and its emphasis on the word French. He, like Marcel's parents, was opposed to the German occupation. "Merci beaucoup," he said. "Will you excuse me for a minute?" He disappeared through a door behind the counter, leaving Marcel to wait in the shop. Marcel knew he would read the message and then destroy it. While waiting, Marcel looked around the shop. There were clocks and watches of every description. Clocks that sat on mantles, clocks that hung on the wall. There was a cuckoo clock and a grandfather clock, and glasses cases were filled with watches. He leaned over to see them better. He'd love to have a stopwatch so he could time himself on the bike. Maybe one day. The man returned. He was frowning. "We have a problem," he said. "There was an accident on the mountain road last night. A big truck carrying crates of chickens overturned. Another driver was speeding and didn't see the downed truck in the dark. He hit it, and the truck went up in flames. The fire spread before the fire truck got there, and it took several hours to put it out. Now the whole area is a mess. The road is waterlogged and there are branches all over the place. There is even a downed tree. And let's not forget the chickens that they are still trying to round up. It won't be safe for the family to go until everything is back to normal. But they have to get out of town immediately. They can't stay where they are. Someone at school exposed the girl." said the man. If that's true, then someone at school will have already contacted the gendarmes. Maybe not. It's a holiday, Marcel pointed out. You could be right. The man looked hard at Marcel, as if sizing him up. This family, you say they need a place to stay. Maybe I can arrange that. Maybe. But I'd have to get a message to another one of our people. Ordinarily, I'd go myself, but I can't, he said, and gestured to his wounded ankle. Can you do it instead? Marcel hesitated. He was already running late. His parents, especially his mother, would be worried about him being gone so long. But who could have predicted that the truck would have overturned? Or that the silver-haired man wouldn't be able to deliver a message himself? I'll do it, he said. Just tell me where to go. All right, said the man, but I don't want to give you a note. It's too dangerous. You'll have to memorise what I'm going to tell you. Then you'll have to memorise whatever information the contact gives you. I memorised the information that got me here, said Marcel. I can memorise this too. Head to Port Vendres. When you get to the centre of town, face the big church with the stained glass window. Take a right turn at that corner. Go 3 more streets and take a left. Continue on that street until you come to a stone house with black shutters and lace curtains. Marcel nodded. I'll remember, but that takes me farther from home. I'll get back much later than I thought. My parents will be worried. I'd offer to telephone your parents, but you know that's not safe. Marcel knew why. The few telephones in town were party lines, which meant they were hardly private. Resistance members would not dare communicate in that way. Since there was no way to reach his parents, Marcel got back on his bike, heading towards the coastal town of Port Vendres, about 10 kilometres away. He rode swiftly, intent on reaching his destination as soon as he could. He'd have a long way back, and the days were short now. He'd probably have to ride home in the dark. He'd never been this far from home before, and he tried to keep an eye out for landmarks, just in case he needed them on the return trip. There was a stone church with a bell tower, and there was a pasture with a low fence. Behind it, a white horse grazed peacefully. He'd just come to the centre of a small village when the bike must have gone over something sharp. Suddenly, he was wobbling his way, this way and that, the bike weaving out of control. He stopped and jumped off to inspect. No! His back tyre was flat. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. No, no, no. Marcel looked wildly around. It was a holiday. Even if the town had a bike shop, which he highly doubted, it would be closed. What was he going to do? His fear quickly mounted to full-blown panic. He had to get the message through. He had to.